The music mogul who ruled the world of hip-hop with an iron fist, a man whose empire spanned decades, controlling careers, lives, and the very image of power itself. But what happens when the most powerful man in the industry is brought down not by his rivals or the law, but by the very children he tried to erase from existence? This is the unbelievable story of Delilah and Jesse Combmes, two sisters who not only uncovered their father's darkest secrets, but destroyed the empire he built on abuse, fear, and lies. They weren't just witnesses in the most shocking trial Hollywood has ever seen. They were the living, breathing proof of everything the world didn't want to believe. A bloodline hidden for years, a truth that no one was prepared for. In this video, we reveal how the sisters stood up to the very man who tried to bury their existence. Stay tuned, because what happens next will leave you speechless.
Mysterious introduction to the sisters. It was a day that would go down in history. June 5th, 2025. The Manhattan courthouse buzzed with whispers as two mysterious figures walked in, their footsteps echoing through the silence. No one knew who they were, yet they carried an undeniable aura. Delilah and Jesse Combmes. Two young women with hauntingly similar dark eyes, their every movement carrying the weight of years of hidden truths. They were no ordinary witnesses. They were about to shake the very foundation of the case against Sean Diddy Combs. Diddy, the mogul who had ruled the music world, looked on in disbelief as these two women walked past his legal team straight to the prosecution's table. The courtroom was electric with tension. The media, the jury, and even Diddy's own attorney couldn't believe what they were seeing. How could they be here? Who were they? And then, the chilling truth hit. They weren't just anyone. Delilah and Jesse Combmes were Diddy's daughters, his hidden children, the product of a past he had desperately tried to bury. As they stood before the court, their gaze never wavered from the man who was their father. Their calm composure was a stark contrast to the storm raging within them. They weren't just here to testify. They were here to expose everything Diddy had tried to hide. He thought we'd never come for him. Delilah's eyes burned with fury. But today, we're here to drag him into the light. For Mom. A family secret exposed. For years, Delilah and Jesse's existence had been a carefully guarded secret, hidden from the world by a man who feared their very presence. Born in 2008 in Los Angeles, the twins had never known a life free from fear. Raised in isolation, their mother, Lena Bell, kept them hidden away, shielding them from the chaos and pain of their father's empire. But beneath the surface, a far darker truth simmered. Lena Bell, a young dancer, had met Diddy in 2007. What should have been a dream career for her quickly turned into a nightmare. Forced into unimaginable circumstances, she became a prisoner of Diddy's twisted world, and her daughters were left to grow up in the shadow of that torment. Lena, whose beauty and talent had been exploited, fought every day to protect her daughters from the very man who had robbed her of her freedom. She told them stories, horrifying, painful tales of what her father had done. But as children, Delilah and Jesse couldn't fully comprehend the terror their mother had endured. It wasn't until they grew older that the full weight of their mother's silence became clear. "We were born in the shadows," Delilah recalled in a quiet moment before the court, "but now we're stepping into the light. For her, for all the women he hurt." Diddy had tried to erase all traces of their existence. He made sure Lena was silenced, paid off people to cover up the truth, and even went so far as to hide the fact that he had children who were now prepared to make sure that his empire would come crashing down. Their mother had told them from an early age, "You will always have each other. The truth is a weapon, and one day it will free us all." And now, in that courtroom, Delilah and Jesse weren't just going to testify about their father's crimes. They were going to take back what he tried to steal from them, their right to the truth, their right to justice.
The trial begins. As the trial unfolded on June 5, 2025, the courtroom was thick with anticipation. The prosecution, led by formidable Anna Sharma, was ready to lay bare the horrific pattern of abuse Diddy had inflicted on countless women. But what no one expected, what no one could have predicted, was the sudden appearance of Delilah and Jesse Combmes, two women whose mere presence sent shockwaves through the courtroom. The prosecution's opening statements were powerful, but it was Delilah and Jesse's silent entrance that truly set the tone for the trial. Their faces remained composed, their eyes never leaving Diddy as they walked past the spectators and straight toward the prosecution table. It was as if they knew the truth would speak for itself, and they didn't need to say a word to ensure everyone understood the gravity of the situation. The room fell into stunned silence. Even Diddy's lawyer, Tenny Garagos, looked momentarily shaken, his usual confidence faltering as he stared at the twins. They hadn't been on any witness list. No one had been prepared for the sudden, unexpected appearance of these two women who were about to expose the deepest, most guarded parts of Diddy's life. "Who are they?" murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "Are they?" The answer was clear. Delilah and Jesse Combmes were not just witnesses in this trial. They were the living embodiment of everything Diddy had tried to bury. His children, the very proof of the darkness he had spent years hiding. As the twins took their seats, Diddy's stoic demeanor began to crack. His cold, calculating gaze turned frantic, his face paling as the weight of the moment settled in. He knew exactly who these women were. He knew they were here to expose him, his flesh and blood, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He thought he could control everything. Delilah's voice cut through the silence. Jesse, her expression hardening with every passing moment, added, "This isn't just about justice for us, it's for everyone he hurt." The tension in the courtroom was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. Everyone knew this trial would change everything, but it was Delilah and Jesse's unflinching resolve that told the room the truth was about to be unleashed in full force. The trial was no longer about accusations, it was about the undeniable evidence of the harm Diddy had caused and the people who were finally ready to make him pay for it. The Emotional Testimonies. Day 2 of the trial, June 6, 2025, arrived with even more explosive revelations. The courtroom had already been rocked by Delilah and Jesse's unexpected testimony. But what came next would set the stage for a deeper look into Diddy's reign of terror. The prosecution called Mia to the stand, a woman whose presence alone struck fear into Diddy's heart. Mia, a young woman whose delicate frame belied her unbreakable will, was using an alias to protect herself. Her testimony sent gasps through the room. With her voice trembling but resolute, Mia whispered, "I was raped by Mr. Combs." Her words hung heavy in the air as she recounted her experience in Diddy's twisted private space. "It was like Diddy's personal dungeon," Mia recalled. "He controlled everything. I couldn't leave. I couldn't escape. He used those videos to threaten me." As Mia spoke, a chill ran through the courtroom. Her story was only one of many, but the details were horrifying. She described a room where privacy didn't exist, a room where Diddy's power reigned supreme over anyone unfortunate enough to be trapped in it. "He manipulated women with money, with power, with fear," Mia continued, detailing a brutal assault on singer Cassie Ventura. The moment the words left her mouth, Diddy's face twisted into something darker, a crack of panic emerging in his cold, impenetrable mask. But it wasn't just Mia's words that changed everything. The prosecution, led by Anna Sharma, requested to play an audio recording from Lena Burl's personal diary. The courtroom fell into an eerie silence as Lena's frail, familiar voice echoed through the room. "I wasn't myself anymore. I was just a tool for his darkest fantasies." Lena's voice trembled as the recording played, her words a chilling reminder of everything Diddy had subjected her to. In that moment, it became clear. Lena Bell's experiences were not isolated incidents. They were part of a much larger, darker system that Diddy had built. A system of control, abuse, and silence. Diddy, for the first time in the trial, visibly faltered.
His usual indifference was replaced with genuine panic. As the tape concluded, Diddy buried his head in his hands, his body shaking as the weight of the truth finally pressed down on him. The powerful mogul who had spent years controlling every narrative, every woman, and every situation, had lost all control in a single moment. "He's a monster," Jesse whispered to Delilah, her voice filled with raw emotion. The memory of their mother, Lena Bell, flooded Delilah and Jesse's minds. They remembered the late-night whispers, the sound of their mother's voice in the dark, urging them to remember the truth. It was Lena who had encouraged them to speak up, to hold on to the power of their story. "You can't let him win," Lena had told them, a promise that rang louder than ever before in the courtroom. And now, as the world learned of the horrors their mother had endured, Delilah and Jesse knew they had to continue what Lena had started. They weren't just testifying, they were honoring their mother's legacy. The truth she had fought to protect was finally being revealed.
The turn in the trial. The trial had already taken a devastating turn for Diddy, but on June 7th, 2025, the revelations took an even darker twist. The prosecution, led by Anna Sharma, was ready to turn the tide entirely. The courtroom, once filled with skepticism, was now completely riveted by the testimony of key witnesses, each piece of evidence building toward the inevitable. The prosecution's next witness, a former hotel security guard named Eddie Garcia, took the stand. His testimony was a game changer. Garcia, who had worked at a luxury hotel, revealed shocking details about the lengths Diddy had gone to in order to cover up his abuse. Garcia had been paid a hefty sum, $100,000, to erase evidence of an assault that would have destroyed Diddy's reputation. "I was told to delete footage of a 2016 incident," Garcia recounted, his voice shaky. "I was told to erase everything, or else." The hotel footage had captured an assault on Cassie Ventura, a young artist Diddy had controlled for years. The assault was brutal, a glimpse into the terrifying world that Diddy had created for his victims. Eddie Garcia's admission painted a picture of a man willing to do whatever it took to silence those who dared to stand up to him. "He paid me off to keep it all quiet. I never expected it to come back to haunt me like this." The room was silent as the full extent of Diddy's efforts to cover up his actions began to unfold. What had seemed like isolated incidents were part of a systematic pattern of control, manipulation, and violence that Diddy had orchestrated from the shadows. As the trial pressed on, Delilah and Jesse sat side by side, their hands clenched tightly together. They had heard the stories from their mother, but hearing them recounted by an outsider like Garcia made everything so much more real, so much more horrifying. "Mom was right," she whispered. "It was worse than we ever imagined." Jesse nodded, her face hardening with every passing word. "And now everyone will know the truth he tried so hard to bury." Each new revelation was like a heavy stone being lifted from their hearts. With each piece of evidence, each witness who stepped forward, Diddy's empire of fear and deception crumbled just a little more. The defense, however, was not ready to give up. Diddy's lawyer, Tenny Garagos, fought fiercely to dismiss the mounting evidence. But as the prosecution continued to pile on the proof, it became impossible for anyone in the courtroom to deny the truth. The sisters could see it in Diddy's eyes. The fear was real now. He had spent years hiding behind his wealth and power, but now, in the cold light of the courtroom, the truth was his greatest enemy. "This is it," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper. "We've got him. It's over." And with that, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation, knowing the trial had reached its most critical moment. There was no turning back now.
Delilah and Jesse take the stand. June 11th, 2025. The moment everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. The courtroom was on edge, the air thick with anticipation. Prosecutor Anna Sharma called out their names, Delilah Combmes and Jesse Combmes. The room erupted into whispers, the sound of camera shutters snapping like gunshots as Delilah and Jesse made their way to the witness stand. Every eye was fixed on them, but neither sister flinched. Their movements were deliberate, their gaze unwavering as they ascended to the stand. They weren't nervous. They had already faced the hardest part. This was just the final act in the story they had been forced to live. As they sat down, the silence in the room deepened. The gravity of what they were about to say hung in the air. Anna Sharma, her voice calm yet charged with purpose, began the questioning. "Please, tell the jury about your relationship with Mr. Sean Diddy Combs," Sharma asked. Delilah took a deep breath, her voice steady but filled with the weight of years of pain and silence. "Mr. Sean Diddy Combs is our biological father." Her words hit like a thunderclap. The courtroom was stunned into silence. For 18 years, Diddy had hidden them away, denied their very existence. But now, they were here, speaking the truth he had tried so desperately to erase. Jesse's turn came, and the fury in her voice was unmistakable. "We were born in Los Angeles in 2008, but our identities were hidden from the world for all these years. Our mother was Lena Bell, a young dancer who met him in 2007. When she found out she was pregnant, he abandoned her. He never wanted us. We were living proof of his crimes." The jury listened in stunned disbelief as Jesse continued. "My mother called that room hell on earth. It wasn't just a room. It was a torture chamber where our mother and other women were held captive and abused." Her words were laced with pain, but also with the strength of knowing they had finally been heard. Delilah's voice broke in with a chilling statement. "We saw it with our own eyes. We were children, but we knew something was wrong." As the sisters spoke, they revealed a critical piece of evidence, a USB drive containing their mother's diary. Delilah carefully placed it on the table in front of the jury. It wasn't just a document, it was the key to understanding everything Diddy had tried to bury.
The jury leaned forward as Delilah continued. "This is our mother's diary. She documented everything, from the first time she met him, to his threats, to the parties, to the abuse. It also contains photos, audio recordings, and notes about how he paid people to conceal our existence." The courtroom fell into a tense silence as the prosecution played one of the recordings. The clear, trembling voice of Lena Bell filled the room. "Don't let anyone know about Lena, and especially not about the twins. If this information gets out, you will pay the price." Diddy's face, once composed, now twisted with fear and rage. His carefully constructed world was crumbling in front of him piece by piece. The truth was now undeniable. Jesse continued, her voice shaking with fury and emotion. "My mother suffered for years. She died from a mysterious illness a few years ago, and we believe it was no coincidence. She had been through too much." Delilah nodded, adding, "Our mother told us everything. She wanted justice, and now we are here to give it to her." The courtroom was in complete upheaval. Diddy, once the unchallenged king of hip-hop, was now facing the reckoning he had long tried to avoid. His empire, built on lies and fear, was falling apart as his own children exposed his darkest secrets. As Delilah and Jesse continued their testimony, they spoke of their own experiences, the horror of growing up in a house where every corner held fear and the constant echoes of their mother's pain. But they also spoke of something more, the strength their mother had given them to stand up, to fight back, and to bring the truth into the light. "This isn't just about us," Jesse said, her eyes burning with passion. "It's for all the women he hurt, for everyone he controlled. The truth can't stay hidden anymore."
The impact and verdict. June 12, 2025. The tension in the courtroom was almost unbearable. The defense had fought tooth and nail to discredit the sisters, to downplay the overwhelming evidence that had been presented. But with each passing moment, Diddy's once invincible empire continued to crumble. The jury had heard from Delilah and Jesse, seen the evidence, and listened to the devastating testimonies. There was no turning back. Prosecutor Anna Sharma, standing tall and poised, delivered the closing argument, a powerful plea that resonated throughout the room. She summarized the harrowing details of the case, the suffering of countless women, the years of manipulation, the cover-ups, and brought the jury's focus back to the heart of the trial, the testimony of the sisters. "These women," Sharma began, her voice steady, "are the key to understanding the truth behind Sean Diddy Combs' reign of terror. They didn't just lose a father, they lost their mother to a man who tried to erase their existence. These daughters, the living proof of his cruelty, stood up and exposed him when the world least expected it. The room was silent as Sharma's words echoed in the minds of everyone present. The defense had tried to paint a picture of Diddy as a victim of false accusations, but the truth had been laid bare. Diddy had manipulated, controlled, and destroyed countless lives for years, and now his own flesh and blood had brought his empire to its knees. As the defense team, led by Tenny Garagos, mounted one last desperate attempt to save Diddy, the courtroom could sense that it was too late. The jury had seen the truth. They had heard the voices of the victims, the families, the women who had been silenced for so long. The weight of the evidence was undeniable. The focus returned to Delilah and Jesse. They had come so far from their childhood fears, their dark memories of their father's abuse. They had found strength not just in their own resolve, but in the knowledge that their mother's legacy, her fight for justice, had finally been honored.
"We have done what we came here to do," Delilah whispered, her voice barely audible as she glanced at her sister. "For Mom, for all the women." Jesse nodded. Her face was filled with both anger and a sense of quiet victory. "We're finally taking him down. It's over." At 3 p.m. on June 12, 2025, the jury foreman stood, the moment everyone had been waiting for. He addressed the court, his voice steady but filled with the weight of the decision. The room fell silent as he read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in an overwhelming mix of emotions, cheers, tears, and a palpable sense of relief. Delilah and Jesse stood motionless, their faces a mixture of disbelief and quiet triumph. They had done it. The man who had tormented their mother, who had caused so much pain to countless women, was finally being held accountable. Diddy, for the first time, was no longer the powerful mogul who had controlled everything around him. His face drained of color as the realization set in. He had spent years covering up his actions, using his wealth and influence to manipulate the system. But now the truth exposed him for who he really was. His empire was in ruins, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As Diddy was escorted out of the courtroom, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow with defeat. The king of hip-hop had fallen. But for Delilah and Jesse, this moment wasn't just about a legal victory. It was about something deeper, something more personal. It was justice for their mother, for the women whose voices had been silenced for too long. As the courtroom emptied, Delilah and Jesse embraced, their emotions finally breaking through. They had lived with the weight of their mother's suffering for years, but now that weight had been lifted. Their victory was not just for them, but for every woman who had been oppressed, abused, and controlled by a man who thought he was above the law. "We did it," Jesse said, tears welling up in her eyes. "For Mom," Delilah added, her voice filled with gratitude and strength. "We did it for her."
The conclusion, the legacy of truth. The trial of Sean Diddy Combs has become one of the most infamous in modern history, not just because of the high-profile nature of the case or the shocking accusations, but because of the unprecedented role Delilah and Jesse Combs played in exposing their father's dark empire. It was a trial that changed everything. Not just for the victims, but for those who had been silenced for years, those whose voices had never been heard until now. For Delilah and Jesse, the fight didn't end with the verdict. It had only just begun. Their victory wasn't just about holding their father accountable. It was about making sure that the truth, no matter how ugly, was never hidden again. They had fought for the truth of their mother's pain, for the countless other women who had been silenced, and for their own right to be seen, to be acknowledged. Diddy's empire may have crumbled, but the damage he had done, both to his victims and to the world around him, was immense. But Delilah and Jesse's testimony and the truth they exposed served as a beacon of hope for others who were suffering in silence. The message was clear: truth and justice can't be buried forever. As the world reflected on the trial and its aftermath, the story of the two sisters who brought down one of the most powerful figures in entertainment would live on. Their courage would inspire countless others to speak out, to stand up for themselves, and to fight against the darkness that had tried to silence them. For Delilah and Jesse, the journey was far from over. They would continue to fight for justice, not just for themselves, but for their mother, Lena Bell, and for every woman who had ever been victimized by those in power. Their story was a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of truth, and the undeniable strength of family. They had proven that no one, no matter how powerful or untouchable they seemed, could escape the truth. They had shown the world that justice, in the end, will always prevail. "We've won, but this is just the beginning," Delilah whispered, her voice full of determination. "We'll make sure the truth never gets buried again." And with that, the legacy of Delilah and Jesse Combmes, the daughters who brought down an empire, was sealed. Their story would inspire generations to come, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice is the truth, no matter how long it takes to come to light.